Men are women, women are men, black is white, and white is black. Welcome everyone to another book review. Today I have for you The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray. This book, why did I read it? Well, I have seen him on a bunch of podcasts and I've found his reasoning, his arguments very logical. And I also read his book, The Strange Death of Europe, which I thought was quite a fair and balanced view of the situation of what's happening with immigration in parts of Europe. So I said, all right, I'll dive into the cultural wars once again. I'm a little bit over them, but I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it one more time for shits and giggles. So this book was published in 2019, so it's very recent. And Douglas, I guess, is a journalist and a political commentator. So he's right in deep diving and he, I guess, somewhat fighting in these cultural wars that you'd call them. This book has 4 parts. So the full title is The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. But he deals with the 4 sections of it are gay, women, race, and trans. So, man, nothing controversial in this book. God damn. Each one is each section has about 50 to 60 pages, and I guess he highlights modern absurdities of far left thinking, but also treating of like historical treatment of these minorities and how they've been oppressed and how they've also improved over time, as well as the implications of getting it wrong. What happens if you are, I guess, on the wrong side of history on some of these issues? And is there a wrong side? Is there a right side of history? You know, there's some very pertinent questions to be asking. So the type of things you'll hear about in this book are things like why Google Images. If you look up white couple, it'll come up with like a bunch of black couples in the very top results. But if you type in black couple or Asian couple, it'll come up with only black couples or only Asian couples. Things like that. Things like Thomas Sowell, when he was being criticized by, I guess, a sort of far left person, described him as a rich old white man, not realizing that he was actually black. So, just this sort of thinking where it's you judge someone based just on their words and put them in this box and then say everyone who says these sort of things is in this box and we get to treat them like X or whatever. A couple other things like Germaine Greer, people calling her not a feminist, even though she was just one of like the powerhouse feminists of the sort of, I guess, 20th century 20th century leading up into the 21st. And it also deals with a lot of things that have mentioned previously in the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. A lot of the instances in that he also repeats in here. So it's got a bit of a crossover in terms of something I've read recently as well. So what is the themes, I guess? I'm going to split it into 2. The first one is madness. What is madness? And looking at the definition, it comes up with things like extremely foolish behavior or a state of wild, chaotic activity. That somewhat gets at what he's talking about in this book, but I think a better description of it is delusion. And so delusion is idiosyncratic beliefs maintained despite contradictions with reality or rational arguments. And I think that's what he's really trying to get at here, is that a lot of the ideas that are being espoused nowadays have these glaring, blatant contradictions right in front of it. This one thing and this other thing, and they don't mix, but somehow people manage to get in their minds that these things actually are both true, they both can work, and there are certain situations where no, they don't. You need to pick one side or the other, and if you believe one thing, it means you can't believe this other thing. But he talks about, I guess, there's a barrage of incidents where he talks about in this book, showing the contradictions, but how there hasn't been any real change in like the philosophy of, I guess, what you call the average social justice warrior, which is quite interesting. It's quite interesting. So he has some interludes in each of the chapters, in 3 of the chapters, talking about, I guess, what he would call the underpinnings of it. So this is talking about the influence of Marxist foundations, the impact of technology, and the inability to forget or forgive. And we can see this a lot nowadays, where something you wrote in 2005 on Twitter or Facebook or wherever can get dragged up, and it's like, even if it was questionable, your views could have just completely changed. And so people are attacking you for something that you believed 15 years ago rather than what is the current version of you. So it's I suppose, interesting looking at those sort of things and then saying, damn, we're all screwed. So one of the questions I had was, how can you reason with madness? Which is that believing in an ideology, believing in something so fixedly that you can't argue someone out of it reasonably. So there are different methods, and it's fascinating thinking about something. So some of them, like Michael Malice, for example, he's very big on the trolling. So you could just troll your opponents if you want to put it in that way. Oppression, you could just straight up go full Nazi regime on them and squash them down. I think we all agree that's probably not the best way of doing things. Love, treating the people who are attacking you or whatnot with love and trying to, using love as a way of somehow fixing the world. I'm a bit iffy on that one. Or straight up apathy, just going, I don't care. Like, this is unimportant to me. Why do I give a shit? I definitely fall more in the latter company, and I'm not in the cultural wars. I don't care about this stuff. So I'm not out there fighting SJWs in person or online. I'm not out there fighting racist rednecks or white supremacists or whatever either. Like, both just seem completely uninteresting to me. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that is later. The other is the cultural war. So I'll talk about it right now. Choose your battles wisely is what I would say. So the current trend always progresses. There is always something to be angry about. There's always an injustice, no matter how big or how small, to fight over. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to die on this hill? And most hills I don't want to die on. I just think it's, there's nothing to be gained for me here. And I just don't find it interesting. And I think that's interesting. When I say the word interesting, I use it in the term of capturing my attention, something that actually draws me in rather than pushes me away. And most of this stuff nowadays, there was a period of time where I found it interesting, and now it just pushes me away. I go, this is just something I don't care about, because the same things keep coming up again and again. And even if, you fight it, you fix this one thing. Okay, we've got sexuality down, all good. Bam, then comes along fat shaming, and then comes along the next thing. And there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something. So my problem with it, I think, is that if you get into these sort of cultural wars, it really promotes short-term anxiety. There's something happening right now. There's injustice right now. We need to fix it right now, or it's going to continue forever and ever. And I think that's a real mentally damaging thing to be in a constant state of anxiety about, who's being oppressed by who, or these things not being fair. And I think when it gets down to it, you need to have some acceptance or some acknowledgement that the world isn't fair. It's a fucked up, rough place, and some people get really good goes of it, and some people get shit goes of it, and that's just the way it is. And yes, you can improve things by hard work, by putting your soul, your guts into something, by making yourself informed, educated, smarter decisions. There's all these sort of things you can do, but at the end of it, you're still going to die, and everything is against you, and all your friends, everyone you know is going to die, suffer horrible infirmities, and many of them will die very painfully. Shit. Okay, I think that's something you just have to deal with, and that acceptance, I think, would probably solve some of the issues that people have, which is getting caught in this short-term cycle of, I've got to do something, the next thing is coming up. So how do you do that? I guess for me, it's sort of like a meta thing. You need to think how to think, introspecting on your own introspections, practicing how to practice something, learning how to learn, those sorts of things. And I would also say maybe reasoning how to reason would be a good one in here, because when there are those internal contradictions, I think that's something that you should try and acknowledge and work out within yourself, rather than, just push it down under. It's almost like people talk a lot of nowadays about trauma. Instead of pushing that down, get it out of sight. No, I don't want to deal with this. Maybe that's something you do need to address and deal with. And same with those internal contradictions. If you're believing two different things, you need to sort of say, okay, which is which, and how do these actually work? So my own personal observations, I found the title could be a little bit misleading, and maybe something like The Delusion of the Day or something like that would be more appropriate, because if you're expecting a book about what happens to people in crowd scenarios, what is it about me interacting with someone else, with interacting with someone else, with anonymity and things like that. If you're expecting that sort of psychological book, this isn't really what it is. This book is about the current trends, the current talking points of this year or yesteryear. And so it's a little bit, not talking about that mass psychology, which is what I thought it actually would be talking about. There are landmines throughout this book. He's always talking about the landmines. You step on a landmine of a hot button issue and boom, poof, you get blown up. Well, I'm going to list a couple of that he addressed in here, and I'll just go through it. So he says gay men and gay women don't actually get along. So lesbians and homosexuals aren't actually friends. And even though they both go under the G in the G, or is it lesbians, gay? I don't even know what LGBT stands for. Even though they're part of the same group, the LGBT whatever, they definitely aren't friends. And he talks about this, and he sort of has experience because he actually is a gay man. Writing women out of the story with gay male partners, for example. So not even acknowledging that, okay, there is another side of a completely very important side of the issue. If two gay guys want to have a baby, well, there's a woman's got to be a part of that story somehow, but there's people who are sort of like writing them out of it. Same thing of dynamics of parenting with only one biological parent. So if you have two mothers or two fathers, only one of them can actually be the mother and only one can actually be the father. So how do you deal with that if you are the non-father in the relationship and things like that? And it's like, this is people's just saying, two males having two dads is the same as having a dad and a mom in sort of like a heterosexual relationship. No, it is very different, and it's probably worth considering those differences. Maybe it could be a good thing, who knows? But at least acknowledging that there's going to be some differences psychologically, physically, biologically, and all those sorts of things is probably a good idea. Feminist attitude to motherhood. So, for example, saying there's a child penalty. So, almost discouraging women from being mothers because there's sort of something. There's a very weird state or place where feminists don't really talk about the joys of motherhood, for example, in their literature and things like that. So, do trans women right to safety override a woman's right to safety, for example? So there's a very pertinent story in here of Karen White, who was a transsexual, a man who identified as a woman, but didn't have any of the surgeries or anything like that. But because they identified, they put her in a women's jail, where she then proceeded to molest and have sexually violate some women in the jail. So then it's like, okay, who has more of, like, what's the bigger concern here? A transsexual man or woman, I don't know the terms that well, a guy who says he's now a girl being put in a guy's prison and potentially being abused by men in that prison, or that same person being put in a women's prison and then they're the one doing the sexual abusing. That's a very hot issue. That's a big button topic, and you want to think that out. That's some serious shit right there. There's a lot of things. Can a white actor play a gay, female, trans character? There's questions to be asked about that. If gender is malleable, is race also? Could I say, even though I am Caucasian and have been born white, can I identify as being black or Asian or whatever? And then the big one, oh man, I saw this coming from ages off. Race and IQ. Boom. Oh, that's the mother of all landmines. That's like one of those atomic landmines they talked about in Eric Schlosser's Command and Control. If you haven't heard of that book, they actually developed atomic landmines. Why you would need something that ridiculous? Who knows? But this book is just full of landmines, and the funny thing is, he is just running through the field with clown shoes on, left and right, boom, 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 boom. He has hidden every single one in this book, which I found that was huge props to Douglas Murray for doing that, because goddamn, if he wants to get cancelled, like, it's almost like he's trying to get cancelled, because everything he says in this book is like, Man, you sure you want to say that? You sure you want to fight that battle? Overall, though, I feel I'm better off not knowing the shit. Even though the book was a blast to the past for me over sort of like 4 years ago when I cared about these things, nowadays it's like I just don't have time. I don't really care about this. So this is probably going to be one of the last books I read or do a review on, at least in the next 6 months, about these types of issues, because I just don't care. I simply don't care. I also found it absolutely hilarious that in his, I guess, that page in the front where they write quotes, he quoted Nicki Minaj, and to quote, "Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Look at her butt. Look at her butt." Fantastic. I love it. So in summary, it's very smoothly written considering the density of the topics, and doesn't feel like a bludgeoning of info, which, now reflecting on it, there's a lot of things he covers in this book, a lot of things, but it didn't feel like it was getting rammed at me or thrown down my throat or whatever. It was like, oh, okay, these are interesting. Oh, by the way, if you find that interesting, you might be intrigued by this story over here. And it just keeps going and going. So there's absolutely shocking absurdities. I just mentioned the transsexual in the women's jail, molesting women. Like, what the fuck? How did that fall through the cracks? That's the sort of thing we should all be aware of. And but it's told in a humorous style, so you don't get too depressed while reading the book. And I thought it was a pretty good analysis. So I would go as far as to say superb analysis of the current times. I'm going to give the book The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray a 7 out of 10. I'd probably give it more if I hadn't heard most of this stuff before, and if I was, just intrigued by it. But I'm just not nowadays, just purely not. So what's something pragmatic? I'm going to read Conundrum by Jan Morris. He mentioned this in the book, and it's a story of a man transitioning to a woman back in the days of, I think it was like the 1950s or maybe even before that. And that was like, holy shit, okay, this is a person who really put it all on the line. Like, this was a person who was doing this shit in a time where it was very, very oppressive. And the way he described the book made me think, okay, this would be actually quite a fascinating book to read. The other is maybe write down some boundary points. So, when should I start caring about these things? Because I can't just ignore all news. I had to hear about the coronavirus at some point. I had to hear about things that are affecting me directly in Brisbane at some point. So there's probably a time and a place where I need to be aware of, okay, if things are going rapidly downhill and there's stuff that's happening that I don't believe in and I can't support, at what point do I say, I need to fight against this. I need to take more actions or take actual actions in real life against these sort of things. I don't know. And it can be on either side. It could be against, like I said, the right or the left. I don't care about politics. So, just describing them at all is, I find, quite annoying. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't cancel me. That wouldn't be cool. But if you do, okay, well, do it. And that's it for today. If you found this book interesting, if you have read it, leave us a comment on the YouTube if you're watching there, or head over to our Instagram page at Mere Mortals Podcast. And that's it. Karen out.